Alright, so I came up with some questions. Some we already know, but just
reiterate them.
yeah. And you can expound on anything if you want. Like, we're just doing this for our kids and our grandkids. So.
Okay.
All right. So, let's start off from the very beginning. Your birthday?
I was born on the 22nd of January, 1924.
Wow.
So this January 22nd coming up, I will be 89.
Nice. I should remember that one because that's my sister's birthday. Not 1924. But
22nd January, yeah.
Yep. And where were you born?
I was actually born in a little old hospital up in Brigham City. I don't know whether you know where that is or not.
We passed through it.
Yeah, you do go that way when you go up to Idaho, but you're on the freeway west of the town.
We see the temple, I think. It's
Yeah,
like
there's
tiny.
a new temple up there now. Yeah, I was born up in Brigham City because that's where the hospital was. But when I was born, we were actually living down in South Willard. I don't really know who Willard
No, I
is,
don't.
another town, south of Perry, Brigham City, then Perry, then Willard, and then Pleasant View, and then Ogden, and so on.
Do you know those cool peaks that we see when we're driving by?
There.
That's right.
Those three great big peaks, that's the town of Woodland. That's right ahead of, right above them.
Oh, okay. So did you have to travel to the hospital? Like was that the closest one?
That was the closest one, yeah. That's where my mother went to it. She lost her first child, which was a girl, died at birth because it was during 1918 when there was a big influenza epidemic in the whole world. And they couldn't get a doctor. The two doctors were all somewhere else, and so they couldn't get a doctor, and the baby had its cord wrapped around its neck, and so it died at birth. But then she had 4 boys after that. I was the second boy.
Cool. And so...
What are the names of your brothers?
My oldest brother's name was Duane, D-U-A-N-E. And of course, mine is Alexander Solzhenitsyn. I'm kidding.
Did you get along with your brothers?
Oh, sure. But my brother younger than I is named Clifford. And the brother that's youngest of all of us, who's 3 years younger than I am, was named Marlin.
Marlin. Cool.
And do they live around here, or?
One lives up in Perry, this little town, Perry, and one lives now in what is now Kearns. But it wasn't Kearns all the time. Kearns was actually built in World War II.
Wow.
As a military training. That's where I took my basic training for the military, was in Kearns. And it was a military barracks field and so on.
Wow.
But after the war, why they converted it into a living situation.
That's cool. So your parents, what were they like?
One was a man and one was a woman. A little different than some today. Oh, they were great. We were farmers. In fact, I lived on a farm, was raised on a farm until I got married and went into the military. But all the way up through that area of even now, there are lots of orchards, fruit orchards, peaches and cherries and apples and so on. And I used to work in all of those orchards when I was a kid, and in fields farming for other, working in a farm.
Well, I would like to work in an orchard where I actually enjoy the food that I'm around.
Oh, I used to eat a lot of fruit out of the orchards because I didn't have any lunch, and so I'd go eat something that was in season.
Yeah. If you're like potato farmer or something. It's like you can't just grab a potato
Yeah,
and eat
well,
it.
you could if you knew what to do.
And how did you meet your wife?
We were together in high school. I met her in high school. I didn't know her until the last year of high school. But
Was she in the same grade as you?
yes, we graduated together.
Okay.
Although she was 3 months older than I was. But I was one of the youngest in the class.
Cool. And so your high school sweethearts, or just your senior year, and then right after high school you got married, or?
No, we graduated in the spring of 1941, and we got married in February of 1943. So it was technically almost 2 years
Okay.
later.
Okay.
We didn't get married right away, but
What are some things that you miss about her?
everything. It's tough to be alone. Well, we had actually 53 plus years together. We had our 50th anniversary and everything together, but she died after we'd been married just a little over 53 years.
That's awesome. I mean, not awesome that she left, but.
Of course, that's the thing that still bothers me, if you want to call it that. The University of Utah hospital killed her. She didn't just die, they killed her.
What happened?
She had her back started hurting, and so we went over here to the hospital that I was in when I had my heart deal, and they checked her over and found out that she had an infection in her spine, about halfway down her spine on the inside. It wasn't right on the back, it was inside, so they couldn't actually go in from the front to do something about it, because that's where your stomach and your bladder and all that stuff is. So they were trying to cure it by injecting medications from the back, and they thought they had cured this infection over here at this hospital. But then all of a sudden on one day, I had been over there, and they called me and they said, "We have your wife in a ambulance on her way to the University of Utah hospital, because we apparently haven't cured that infection in her back." So I got in the car and I headed down there chasing the ambulance, but I got there a long time after it got there. But anyway, she was down there, I think it was either 2 or 3 days, and they had, as near as I could tell, they hadn't done anything for her down there. Just put her in a room, kind of hoping she'd die, I guess. But so I tried to get some action going, and so I stayed down there all day with her those days, and then I'd come home at night, try to sleep. Just before I left her that one day, they decided that the room she was in was not intensive enough, so they put her up in ICU at the intensive care unit. So I helped wheel her up to that place, and then I left her and came home. And they called me about 11 o'clock at night and said, "You had better come back to the hospital, your wife is in serious condition." So I called your mother and told her about it, and then I got in the car and headed as fast as I could down to the hospital. And when I got there, she had already died before I got there. But what had happened is they had given her staph infection. And whatever they've been trying to do down there, they had somehow or other introduced the staph infection that's called sepsis. I don't know whether you know what that is or not. It's defined as a bacterial infection of the blood. Or some people call it blood poisoning. But anyway, by the time I got down there, she had passed away. because they'd give her that staph infection.
I didn't know that.
So they killed her down there with whatever they tried to do down there. Didn't do it right. I should have sued him, but I never did. Should have taken him to court.
So
But anyway.
what was she like? Like, what are like?
That's her picture right over there. I think Bryce knows what she looks like.
Absolutely.
That's one of her latest pictures. Here's another of our later pictures right up here. That's our marriage picture there.
So there's that, and then there's that picture, so the camera can see it.
Yeah, this is one. I think she had this picture taken when I was in Vietnam.
No. Oh, she's lovely.
What was her full name?
Her first name was Donna, and her second name was Uarda.
Uarda.
Very strange name, Uarda, Uarda. And her maiden name was Reeve, Rweve. Her older brother was long before your time, was a big name football player for BYU. And he actually played for the Detroit Lions. After he got out of college, he played for the professional football for a couple of 3 years.
Wow, I didn't know that. That's cool.
And is she from around the same area you're from?
She was born and raised. She was actually born out in Bear River City. You might know whether that is or not. But when she was just a little girl, they moved into Brigham City, and so she actually lived in Brigham City.
Okay.
So that's where she went to school, and I went to school at Willard till I finished the 8th grade, and then I went up to Box Elder High School, which was the only high school in the county. There's another one out of called Bear River High out of Garland or Tremont.
So, what wars did you serve in?
Well, I was in World War II. I was in Korea. I flew 55 combat missions over the line in North Korea, flying bombing missions. I was the navigator and bombardier both in an airplane which the Air Force called the B-26. And then I was in a CIA operation in the Belgian Congo in Africa, flying out of France down there and hauling supplies down to that operation. And then I was in Vietnam. So I was actually involved in 4 conflicts.
And what was one scariest experience you had in the war? In any of the
I've had
conflicts?
lots of scary experiences in the war. I suppose one that I live to tell about is an 88 millimeter anti-aircraft shell that they shoot at airplanes from the ground guns. Is 88 millimeters across, so it's about that big around, and it's about that long when it comes out of the barrel of a gun down there, and they can set a altitude to it so that when it gets to a certain altitude it explodes. And as you look at it on TV or on a movie, they call it flak, F-L-A-K, and it becomes a black burst of explosion, and you see it in the sky. Well, the B-26 airplane has a plexiglass nose that the navigator and bombardier are in, and it's about that wide across, just enough to get out to the bomb site. And the propellers has 2 engines, and the propellers are outside, and they swing towards it, and they only clear that plexiglass nose about that far, like so. I have watched them shooting those 88 millimeter anti-aircraft shells at us from a gun battery down near Pyongyang, Korea. And as they come out of those gun barrels, they're red from the heat of the friction and so on of the explosion coming out of those barrels. So I could follow them out of the barrel and see them coming. And I noticed one shooting at us, and I saw this come out of the barrel red, and it came up and up and up and up and up. And we were at 7,000 feet, but the barrels, those guns were down there were about 4,000 feet. So we were only about 3,000 feet above them. So it didn't take very long for the shell to get there. And I have seen one of those 88 millimeter anti-aircraft shells come up out of that gun and go between me and the engine right there. On up and exploded above us a ways.
Oh my gosh.
If I had a way to do so, I could have reached out and touched it. If it had been 6 inches in any direction or had hit the propellers,
Oh man.
I wouldn't be here today.
That's pretty intense.
But I've had a lot of other experiences very similar to that where they've been shooting at us and so on. When they would shoot the 37 millimeter stuff at us, 37 millimeters only about that big around, they would stupidly put tracers in it. I don't know why they would put tracers in it, but they couldn't know any better, those guys down there. So as they came up, about every third or fourth shell was a kind of what they call tracer. It has a little light effect to it, so it looked like a string of ping pong balls coming up at you, and so you could tell where it was coming, where they were shooting. So you just flew around that. But those 88s, they didn't do that. They just shot them right at us.
Wow.
Man.
So I remember as a kid, you used to tell us a story of when you accidentally blew up an ammunition dump.
I didn't accidentally blow it up. It was just happened to be the target I hit. We flew in these B-26s. We always flew our missions at night. We were called a night interdiction squadron. And so all of our B-26s were loaded with bombs that we always flew at night. And so we would get our briefings in the afternoon as to what our routes would be that night and then what we were supposed to bomb. But most of the time what we would bomb would be trucks and trains going up and down the highways. And so I had already done a lot of missions, and our airplanes were really able to carry a lot of bombs. We would carry 14 260-pound bombs into Bombay inside the airplane, and then we would carry out on the wings 2 500-pounders under each wing. So there would be 4 500-pound bombs outside the airplane, and then there would be 14 260-pound bombs inside the airplane that I had control of with the Northern Bomb Sight. And so we were flying this one night, and I had already been on this route many times. I could see the trucks coming down, and as soon as they could hear our airplane, they would turn their lights off, because at night they had to have lights on to drive by. But as soon as they'd hear our airplane, they'd turn their lights off, so that we didn't know where they were. But on this particular one, I could see them coming down the road, and then they would turn off and shut their lights off. And I thought, well, what they're doing is they're hearing our airplane and they're turning off there, and they're parking in this flat place or something down there. As soon as we'd go, they'd turn on and we'd go on down. So I thought, well, I'll fool them. I won't bomb their road, I'll bomb their parking lot. So I aimed up, but I'd already dropped my big bombs outside. I'd dropped them elsewhere on the roads. So I aimed up my bomb sight at the parking lot, not the road, but a parking lot, I thought. And I dropped 3 bombs. I would drop 3 of the littler bombs because we couldn't tell how high the ground was down there. And so if you didn't hit right on, why, of course, it would not hit where you wanted it to. So I would drop 3, and I'd drop 1 with the Northern Bomb Sight. I'd drop it just barely short of where I thought it might be the best place to hit. then I would drop one exactly on that spot, and then I would drop one just a little bit over, just a matter of a few feet. So when those 3 bombs went, the first one exploded, and all it was just a bomb explosion. And the second one exploded right where I wanted it to be, but it was just a bomb explosion. And the third one, when it exploded, it went whoom! I mean, it almost knocked us out of the sky. It was such a violent explosion.
Oh my gosh.
Clear up, we were 7,000 feet or more, and it just about knocked our airplane out of the sky.
Oh my
We
gosh.
couldn't get control of the airplane. It was like this.
Oh man.
And finally we controlled it, the pilot did. And then I could see that what we had probably hit was not a parking lot, but they were going in there to an ammunition dump. Is what they were pulling off there for. So I thought, well, I've still got 11 bombs in the bomb bay. I've still got 11. I'll just keep that thing going as long as I can. So I would come in from a given direction, and as soon as it would kind of quiet down a little bit as far as the flames and that, I'd drop one more bomb right on it, and boom, it didn't go again. Then I'd come in as I'd go on over and turn around and come back. I'd come in from another direction so they couldn't tell where I was coming from. And I'd keep dropping one bomb at a time until I kept that thing going for something over 4 hours.
Holy cow.
And finally we decided we'd be getting low on fuel, we'd better get back. So I had been, by that time I had dropped all 11 bombs. And so we headed on back, but as we went out of our missions every time, we had to call a radio station in Seoul, Korea, and tell them where we had dropped our bombs. I had recorded where all my bombs were all the time. So I told them I had hit this ammunition dump and had dropped all my bombs, with the exception of the 4 outsides. I had dropped them all at this one location. And I had told them that I had destroyed, or I thought I had destroyed, a huge ammunition dump. So they got concerned, I guess, about it. So at daylight the next morning, they sent some jet airplanes out of Seoul airport up to this particular place I had told them to see what had happened. And their report back came that we had destroyed half the mountain.
Oh my
We had
gosh.
blown away half the mountain.
Holy
I've been
cow.
keeping that thing going for all those that length of time.
Wow.
We had destroyed that huge ammunition dump.
Holy cow.
That's pretty crazy.
So there's one more mission that I want you to tell us about a time where you stopped a war or a conflict from happening.
Well, that's an entirely different story.
Right.
After I had gone to Korea and I'd gone to a lot of other assignments, flying C-140, C-124s out of Travis, California to the Pacific. I'd flown that route 100 times or so. And they finally, after I got enough rank, got to be a lieutenant colonel, they sent me over to Turkey to be an advisor to the Turkish Air Force. Well, one of my jobs over there, I rewrote their entire supply manual while I was there, and I got a letter in my file in there from the Turkish General Staff congratulating me and thanking me for doing that. But anyway, somehow or other the Turks and the Greece and Turkey got into a situation where they were going to go to war over the island of Cyprus. And I don't know whether you know where Cyprus is or not, but it's an island off of the coast of Turkey. And anyway, there's about half of it is Greek and half of it is Turk. But one of my jobs, or one
Okay.
F-86s, we had given away, and we'd given a lot of them to Turkey. But the F-86 airplane's engine was very touchy. It had to have a very special type of engine oil in it. You couldn't just go down to the shop and buy a can of 10W40 and put it in there. That would freeze the engine up. So I knew they were short on oil, and it was my job as an advisor to the Turkish Air Force to see that they had all the supplies coming from the U.S. that they needed to keep that fleet of F-86 airplanes flying. And I knew they were getting short on oil. I think I knew exactly how many gallons of it they had, drums of it. It came in drums. But when the Turks and the Greeks got in this tussle over to the island of Cyprus, I knew that the Turks were getting ready to bomb the Greeks on Cyprus. And I found out through various sources there that they didn't have enough oil at their various bases to sustain an operation that they liked. They would be able to fly 1 or 2 missions, and then their planes would be grounded. They couldn't fly them anymore, didn't have any oil. So I had, before this, quite a while before this, I had ordered a whole boatload, I mean a whole boatload of this oil in drums to come out of the U.S. and to come to Turkey. And I had received word from the boat captain that he had just passed Gibraltar. You know where Gibraltar is? No. It's the rock that sits out as it enters the Mediterranean as you come out of the Atlantic. The thing sticks out there. It's called the Rock of Gibraltar. And he had wired me and told me he had just passed Gibraltar and he was on his way in. Well, when I knew that the Turks were getting ready to bomb the Greeks in Cyprus, I radioed him back and says, do not come into Turkey. Go to Haifa, Israel, and anchor your boat there until I tell you different. So he did. Well, the Turks were anxious to get that oil, and they kept coming over to my desk from the Turkish headquarters and saying, where's the oil? Where's the oil? Mm-hmm. I would keep telling them, it's on the Mediterranean. I got a word from the captain that he's come past Gibraltar. It's on the Mediterranean. Well, they said, well, will you tell us where on the Mediterranean, and we'll send a destroyer out and escort him into our port. And I says, all I can tell you is on the Mediterranean. I didn't try to lie to him or anything. That's all I tell him. Anyway, after about 3 days, a man named Cyrus Vance from the State Department in Washington, who later became our Secretary of State, came over there as the mediator, and he sat down with the Greeks and the Turks and the Cyprus people, and he got things straightened out so that the Turks were satisfied that the Greeks were all right on Cyprus. And so then when I found out that the Greeks were not planning then to bomb Cyprus, I radioed the boat captain at Haifa, Israel, and told him he could come on in to Iskendron, which is the name of the town where the boat docked, and offload his load. And when I told the Turks that he was coming from Haifa, they still sent a destroyer out to escort him in.
Oh, wow.
And so anyway, when he got in, they offloaded the oil and they got it out to their various F-86 bases so they'd have plenty at each base. Because this whole boatload, I mean hundreds of thousands of gallons of this oil was coming. But that's how I stopped this war between Greece and Turkey, is they didn't have enough oil to fly their airplanes.
Wow.
That's pretty cool.
That is amazing.
So anyway, I never did tell them that I knew where the boat was. I just told them finally, it's coming from Haifa, Israel.
Did you have to write reports about that or anything? Like tell your authorities or anything?
Well, my authorities do.
Oh, okay.
People over me, I told them, but I didn't tell the Turks.
Gotcha. That's funny.
That's pretty cool.
You know, I had a general in charge of me, and he knew what was going on.
Okay.
After I had finally made the decision to send a boat to Haifa.
Yeah.
So here's a funny question. Throughout, like, since you can remember, like, high school or whatever, is there an invention that, like, really shocked you or really, like, impressed you, like, throughout the years?
something that completely changed the way you did things or changed the world? Or is there any like one particular invention that just
Yeah, computer.
computer?
Yeah, there was no computer when I was a kid. Nothing like that.
Do you use the computer now in your life?
I don't have a computer that works.
Oh, okay.
Well, let me rephrase that too. I got a computer back there in the room, but all I've got on it is my genealogy, me and my family and my ancestors and so on. But I don't have any way to get, it is not hooked up to the internet. So I don't get any internet or anything like that. So,
Well,
but that's one of the inventions that's come up since I've been alive. Another one is airplanes. See, the Wright brothers didn't fly their first airplane until 1905, and they did have airplanes in World War I, but they were just little teeny airplanes. But then the airplanes got commercialized, and they got passengers, and they carried mail and so on. And so now we've got jet airplanes that fly 80,000 feet in the air, you know, and travel at 1,000 miles an hour. But we didn't have that when I was a kid.
I think I saw something where there's this plane that can take you up into space.
Yeah, I saw that on the TV the other night. It can
pretty
take you up
crazy.
and it can land you back down again if it wants to.
That's amazing.
You can see the Earth as a whole.
Yeah,
I think it probably costs a few $1,000s to do that, but
I think it's hundreds of thousands.
hundreds.
200 and some odd $1,000 for a ride on that airplane.
Wow.
I don't think I'll take that.
So when did you get your calling to be a sealer?
I got my calling, I was actually an ordnance worker in Ogden. I started the Ogden Temple. I was actually set apart as an ordnance worker before the temple was dedicated in Ogden. And so I went in on various days and helped them get things set up for the public viewing, for the month or so of the public viewing. So I was actually set apart as an ordnance worker about 2 months before the Ogden Temple was dedicated, and it was dedicated January the 19th, 1972. So I worked as an ordnance worker for 9 years, and I was the head honcho, if you want to call it that, of a group, one of the groups, for 9 years as an ordnance worker. I was the boss of all the ordnance workers on that shift. Then they asked me if I would like to be a sealer, and they wanted me to be a sealer, and I said, so sure. So in August of 1981, I and 4 other men from Ogden went down to President Kimball's office in Salt Lake to be set apart to receive what we refer to as the sealing power or the sealing authority. And on August the 13th, 1981, President Kimball gave me the authority to seal in the Ogden Temple. So I sealed in Ogden for 14 years. And then they built the Bountiful Temple, and because this area became part of Bountiful's district and not stayed part of Ogden's district, they transferred my authority to seal from Ogden to Bountiful. And Bryce, go over there and get that big white thing behind that end big jug. Just that thing there. Just pull that little one out and bring it in. That's my authority. That little card at the bottom is my authority that got me in the Ogden Temple right here. That's signed by President
Spencer W.
Kimball.
Wow.
And then when I got to the Ogden was not my temple anymore, President Hunter sent this letter to the temple telling them that my authority had been changed from Ogden to Bountiful.
Wow.
That's awesome.
So this one's signed by Howard Hunter, this one's signed by Spencer Kimball.
Awesome.
That is really cool.
So I've been sealing now. Last August, I had finished 31 years as a sealer. Now I'm well into my 32nd year as a sealer.
So does it ever get old, or do you ever get bored with it?
I don't think so. It's it goes
So what's your favorite part about sealing?
when I get to seal live sealings, like you guys,
Yeah.
and when I get to seal children to their parents who were not born in the covenant.
Yeah, that's special.
But I have sealed. I counted up about how many I had done each year for 30 some years and so on. And I decided that I have probably sealed as couples over 1 million, maybe 1,200,000 people that I have sealed together as couples.
Wow. That's amazing.
Yeah, that's a lot of people.
You can shake their hands in the next life.
People tell me that, but those people will be shaking hands with, besides me maybe, will be the people who came in and
Yeah.
did their proxy work.
Oh yeah, that's
Who
right.
actually go there and were their proxies. And we did the work and sealed them, acting for those people on the other side of the veil.
Yeah.
1.5 million soon.
It's pretty amazing.
Well, we have all eternity to meet them.
So, what advice would you give to the next generation about life or anything?
Well, that's hard. That's a hard one. Well, the first thing I'd tell, and I've got a lot of people in my own family that should hear it,
Say it one more time.
that people should stay close to the church. I've got nieces and nephews who have gone away from the church. And for instance, like Neil, he's kind of getting away or has gotten away some.
Yeah.
But the most important thing is when they die, they should be active members of the church and have had all the regular ordinances that are required. If they haven't, they won't get where they want to be. They will not get to the celestial kingdom. And I think that's where everybody wants to get to, is the celestial kingdom. So my advice to young people would be, in the church, stay in the church. Don't let anybody hurt your feelings enough that you go outside or that you change and do something else. But for people who aren't members of the church, my advice to them would be, join. Get in the proper church.
Yep.
This is the only true living church on the face of the earth, is the one we're in.
And which church is that?
The Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints.
Very good.
Very good. Well, those are all the questions that I came up with, but you did amazing. Thank you for telling all your stories.
Well, I was going to tell you about the area up there where I was born and raised. When the pioneers first came into the valley, Brigham Young sent lots of them, say to Farmington, Bountiful, and they populated the area going north as well as down south. And the first people that they would stop at would be where mountain streams came out of the mountains, so they'd have water for the year round to do, not only have water to drink and so on, but water for crops. Well, when they got going up through Box Elder County up that way, the first one they got to here, it was Ogden, where the Weber River came down through and the Ogden River came down through, so they made a pretty big settlement. I called it Ogden after the explorer earlier than them was Peter Skeen Ogden. And then as they started going further north, when they got up to what is now Willard with those big mountain peaks and so on, and the stream coming down, they called it Willow Creek. I know when they got a little further north, there was a stream coming out of Perry Canyon, which is now called Perry Canyon, that they called 3 Mile Creek, being in fact was 3 miles further north than Willow Creek. Well, then they got further north, they found a mountain stream coming out of the mountain up near Mataway in Box Elder County. They called it Box Elder Creek. because there was a lot of box elder trees. You know what a box elder tree is? It's a maple that has a lot of box elder bugs on it.
Oh, okay.
So anyway, that's a maple similar to the one I got out here. So anyway, that was the names of those settlements as it went on north. Well, finally they decided that they would change Box Elder Creek to Brigham City after Brigham Young. So that then became Brigham City. And then a little further south, the creek that they called Willow Creek, they named Willard after President Brigham Young's counselor, Willard Richards. And so they had now, instead of Willow Creek, they had Willard. Instead of Box Elder Creek, they had Brigham City. But they didn't know what to do with that little 3 Mile Creek deal in between, so they named it Perry. Well, it just so happened that they named it after the postmaster at that particular location, who just happens to be one of my ancestors.
Oh, wow.
You can see L. Tom Perry and I are cousins.
That is cool.
And so we have a common ancestor.
Wow.
And one of our common ancestors' descendants was the postmaster at this little town of 3 Mile Creek, so they named it Perry.
Huh.
So that's the name of how they got those various names up there by those big mountains.
Wow, I didn't know that. That is cool.
So anyway, that's part of the history, because that's where I was born and raised, out on a farm. As you go north, when you're on the freeway going back up to your college, you won't see it, but if you go on this main, just the inner street that goes north from Ogden to Brigham City, as you go north towards Perry, there's a Maddox's Ranch House eatery. I don't know if you ever seen it.
I've seen it, yeah.
Well, just south of that a little ways is a KOA campground affair.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that KOA campground is built on the farm that I used to work in for another neighbor. And just west of that, on the south side of that same street, is where our house was. And I used to have to walk up that lane to the highway every day to go to school and get in a school bus, and it would drive me either to Willard when I was younger or to Box Elder High when I was older. But that street that the KOA campground is on is the road I used to have to walk in the wintertime like this, snow, clear up to the fence post to get to the bus so I could go to school. But that's the area that I lived in. It was then out in the county. It was not part of either city, either Willard or Perry. But I went to Willard School, and eventually now it's part of the Perry boundaries. It's up in Perry, so that's where they.
So were your parents converts, or?
No, no. Well, they were born in the church.
Oh, okay.
I'm a 5th-generation church member. The first man in our family named Woodland, who joined the church, was a man named John Woodland, who was actually born about the time of the War of Independence back in Richmond, Virginia. And after that war, he was not part of it because he was just a kid. But he and his brother, half-brother, decided that they would come through the Cumberland Gap of the mountains back there into Kentucky, and where they set up a place of theirs very close to where Daniel Boone had his set up in Kentucky. And then he joined the church in eastern Illinois, just across west of the Wabash River of Indiana. Between the Wabash River separates Illinois and Indiana. And anyway, he converted to the church in 1832, which was 2 years after the church was formed. And he had a dream, I guess, he called it a dream, where he was supposed to leave that area of Illinois and go over into Missouri when the saints were starting to gather in Missouri. He and a man named Jefferson Hunt joined the church at the same time. And the man Jefferson Hunt is the man for whom Huntsville is named, up here in east of Ogden.
Right.
Anyway, the two of them left left Illinois, and they traveled over into Missouri, and they got a place that staked it out as a homestead for Jefferson Hunt. And then Jefferson said, "Where are you going to get your place to settle?" And he said, "Well, I've had a dream, and I will see a grove of trees, and there will be one tree in the middle of that grove that will be at least 20 feet higher than all the rest." And so they said, "Well, okay, we'll travel on north." So they traveled north a ways, and sure enough, there was a grove of trees with a tree in the middle of it, tall. And Jefferson said, "You don't want a homestead here, there's no water." And John said, "Oh yes, there's water. I've been told there'd be water." So he went to this big tall tree and put his back against it and took, they said, 20 steps west and found a spring. And that spring they got a drink and so on. And it's now called Spring Hill, which is in Missouri, and it's now called Adamondiaman.
Oh, wow.
So my grandfather, great-great-grandfather, double great-great-grandfather settled Adamondiaman.
Wow.
And when the prophet Joseph Smith came through there in about 1838, I think it was, he wanted John to let the church have that property as a stake deal. And John says, "Yes, if you can get me a place that is comparable." But then the prophet said, the church, the family history says, the prophet stood and he dropped his chin to his chest and stood that way for a moment, and then he said, "No, we won't take your property, John. You have been told where this was by a revelation." And so they did not take his property at the time, but then he was driven out of there by the mobs, and he went to the Nauvoo area, and then he came west with the pioneers. But he, being a farmer, didn't come in with Brigham Young in 1847. He kept staying behind a few months at these various places like winter quarters and other places in Iowa, and planting wheat and so on, so that the people behind him could have something to eat as they came on the journey to the valley. So he didn't get out here in this valley until I think about 1849 or so. But anyway, Brigham Young sent him to Farmington, but he didn't stay in Farmington very long, and he was sent on then up to Willard. It was called Willard then because they changed it by Willard to Willard Richards. And then he settled up there, and so our whole family kind of gathered there, and then they went on further up into Idaho, just barely over the border north of Malad, into a place called Marsh Valley. There's a little town called Downey, and there's a little town called Aramo right there just above Malad. And they settled that whole valley.
Oh, wow.
Woodland family settled that whole valley. There are still many woodlands up there in that area. And as you drive north, whenever you go north, as you get past Malad, you'll see and on it you'll see Woodland Avenue or something like that. That's named after one of the family members who settled up in that area.
I'll have to look for that.
So when you go north of Malad, you'll see an overpass go across, and it's got Woodland something written on it.
Okay.
Anyway, there's still a lot of woodlands up that way, but they came back down then out of there. My grandfather himself was born up there in Idaho, and he came down to, I'll take that back. He was born in Willard, and he went up into Idaho. My dad was born in Idaho, in Marsh Valley, and he came back down to Willard when he was a kid. So that's how our family gets to be up that way.
Gotcha.
Whereabouts in Idaho?
It's just north of Malad, called Marsh Valley.
Okay.
And the river that goes out of there, and I forget the name of the river, names bother me, as old as I am. I'll think of it in a minute. But it's the river that drained Lake Bonneville.
Oh yeah.
When Lake Bonneville was clear up on that water line up there,
Uh-huh.
eventually it found a way to start running out, and it went out through that river to the Columbia River up there, and then went to the Pacific, and that's how Lake Bonneville lowered down to what's now the Great Salt Lake. But anyway, that's the river that's in that little valley called Marsh Valley.
Wow.
Okay.
That's where our family settled at the time of the pioneers.
So what made you want to move to Fruit Heights?
Well, that was another kind of a funny story. I got out of the military at Vietnam, and I finished my tour of Vietnam, and I was the chief of supply at the base called Phan Rang, Vietnam. And anyway, I could have stayed in the military as long as I wanted, because I was not a reservist or so on. I was actually in the official United States Army Air Force. That's what that flag over there is. That blue flag.
Gotcha. Yeah.
Anyway, I could have stayed as long as I wanted, but the wife and I decided that after Vietnam, we had had enough. So I flew in up to Washington, the town just south of Seattle by Mount Rainier. I'll think of that in a minute. And anyway, I got released from the Air Force at that place, and we got in the car. My wife had driven from here, where she was living with her sister while I was in Vietnam, and she drove the car up there, and we got in the car and we drove up to the Grand Coulee Dam so she could see the Grand Coulee, which is a huge thing if you've never seen it. It's something else to see. But then we took a road and we went up to Canada and across Canada to Cardston, and then we come down to Yellowstone Park, and then on down to here. And then we decided, well, we'd better settle someplace close enough to Hill Field, or Hill Air Force Base, that we can get the privileges that it affords us, like commissary and all that sort of thing. So we started looking around for a place, and Bart Smith's mother owned that piece, and Bart Smith's uncle owned this piece. They had 2 or 3 of these pieces when they subdivided it. So anyway, I bought this piece of property from Bart Smith's uncle.
Huh.
And you'd be surprised how much it cost me. Back then in 1970, even September of 1970 or August, this piece of property cost me $4,000.
Holy cow.
Now it's 100 and some odd thousand.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That is incredible.
So anyway, we decided to build here. And this house is actually a house built in a barn or a shed or something, what do you want to call it, down in West Jordan. And they got it all built, everything in, the chandeliers hanging and the refrigerators and everything in it. Then they hauled it up here on a big truck.
Whoa.
And I had, in the meantime, built the basement to the dimensions of the house, and had the basement all poured and the floor down there poured and so on, and the garage and this whole thing. Then they just called it here. That street was dirt. There was no dirt in it, nothing in it. It was dirt. So they pulled in there and backed that thing all the way up to where Bart Smith's house is now. Then they backed it up in here where my foundation was, and they backed it to a point just west of it. Then they put some big logs across my foundation, set the house down on the outside, and greased the logs, and got out here with a big truck and slid it on those logs over on top of my foundation. Then they went down in the basement and put some big jacks under it, jacked it up and pulled those logs out and set the house down on my foundation. and it was complete. That
Holy
was
cow.
it.
That is amazing.
The only thing that wasn't done is they didn't have the bricks on the outside. It was wood frame, and so I had a bricklayer come in and put those white bricks all over the house. My house was built down in West Jordan and it brought up here on a trailer,
Wow. That is incredible.
pre-built.
That's pretty cool.
So that's
I would have never guessed.
So that's how this house got here.
Amazing.
But after I had bought the house, I bought the lot, and I had put the basement in and all that sort of thing, and they brought the house in and so on. All together, this piece of property cost me just a little bit over $30,000, house and all.
Wow. No, I'm sure that was a lot back then, but now it doesn't seem that much.
It was a lot back then, but now it's a couple of $300,000.
Yeah.
You know, Gary, he got that newspaper of the man walking on the moon.
Yeah.
1969 paper. Well, we're looking through it, and there's TVs that were on sale in the newspaper, and they're like $2.99, $4.99, and so I did an equivalent of like inflation of what that would be today, and the TV that is $400 in 1969 would be $2,500.
Yeah.
$2,500 today.
Yeah.
So I'm like, that is expensive TV, and it was smaller than that. So.
Yeah, that one I have to hook it up to this little business that's underneath there because it had to go to HD, and that wasn't HD, so now I have to convert it back to
Standard definition?
whatever it was
Gotcha.
before. So I'm still using that.
Huh.
But I got the dish outside, and I got dish also. So
We should get you an HD TV.
that was still good. All I do is push the button here, and it starts.
Yep.
When our TV in our house is about this size, maybe a little smaller, and we sit this close to the TV.
Why do you do that? Your house is only small?
Our house is really small, but
And I'm blind, so. But yeah.
Well, have you got enough questions answered?
Yeah, that was great.
I don't know what you'll do with the thing.
We're just gonna keep it.
post it to YouTube.
Yeah.
Can I get a picture of you with your picture of your
Of
military?
honor, which all the forces give. The second one that the Air Force gives is the Legion of Merit. The third one the Air Force gives is the Silver Star. And the fourth one is the Distinguished Flying Cross, which is what they gave me here.
It's propellers.
Yeah, it's 4 propellers. And this is the Bronze Star. The Silver Star is exactly the same except it's silver and not bronze. This is the Air Medal. And this is the Joint Services Commendation ribbon, which I got for my Turkey deal when I directed the boat. And the rest of them are just regular medals.
And this is for serving in World War II?
Well, no, they're not even on there. That's way down the line. These are higher, way higher than that.
That's cool. Let's get a picture with you. Hold it. You can sit down. Well, you can't take them with you.
Oh, they can't get that.
So what was it you were about to show us?
Oh, he was talking about how close I would have been to getting killed a time or two. When I was in Vietnam, the gooks there, you just bring it up against something there, would lob rockets over into the base. What they would do was they'd get out sometime during the night or so on, and they would set rockets so they would come into base, and then they would set an alarm clock, and they'd wind this alarm clock up, and they'd tie a string to the thing, the winder, you know,
Uh-huh.
and as soon as they'd set it for their clock, and as soon as the alarm went off, they'd wind this string, and when it got to a point where it was tight, it would pull a igniter, and these rockets would blast off and come into our base.
Huh.
But we would go out trying to chase these guys, and they'd been gone for hours, you know.
Yeah.
So anyway, I was driving, I had a Jeep assigned to me, specific Jeep, and my office was down below the main part of the base. So I'd have to go up to the main part of the base to be a commander when he'd have a meeting or something. And I was driving along one time in my Jeep, and I don't know whether you remember how those old Jeeps were or not, but right on the side, they would be all open on the side, and there would be a metal piece come kind of like this as you're driving along. And I heard something blast off, and I knew it was a rocket that had launched, come on in. And all of a sudden, on the side of my Jeep, just ahead of where my leg was, something went clank.
Oh my gosh.
And so I stopped to see what it was, and this is what it was. That's a piece of one of those rockets.
Oh my goodness.
Holy cow.
And anyway, I stopped and picked it up, and it was so hot it burned me.
Oh wow.
But anyway, I
It's
kept
sharp.
it, and I still brought it, and I brought it home. But I was that close to having that thing come in, not
Oh
hit
my-
there, but hit here and hit me in the leg or something.
Oh man. It's scary.
So,
Man, you were protected by angels your whole life, huh?
all the time, I guess, because I spent those 27 years in the military, and I never ever got hurt.
It's amazing.
God had a bigger plan for you.
Must be,
He was-
because I've been working the temple now for, well, since 1972, so 12 would be 40 years. And so this is past 12, so it's 40 some odd years I've been in the temple,
It's amazing.
doing the work there.
God was thinking about those millions of people that you'd help.
Yeah.
That's cool.
That's good.
It's that distinguished flying cross.
That is so
It's the
cool.
same color as those ribbons above the medals.
I did not know that.
Now you know.
Now I know.
Anyway, World War II is down in here, these purple, or these blue ones and yellow ones, and down in here are the World War II stuff. Everything is above this is all higher, those things there.
So are those colors and patterns just meant for those, or
Yeah,
that's cool?
yeah, they have, each ribbon has its own color of each medal has its own color of ribbon. See this green, 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 and what blue? That's that one, the down, second one down on the left there. See that green, all green and blue?
Mm-hmm.
That's a Joint Services commendation I got when I was in Turkey.
That's cool.
Every one of these little deals on here represents it being awarded a second time.
What is it?
See these there, this is what they call oak leaf clusters.
Oh, gotcha.
So I've got this one with 2 oak leaf clusters. I got this one up here with 2 oak leaf clusters. I've gotten this one with 1 oak leaf cluster. That means I've got it a second time. This one I've got 3 times. This one I've got 3 times.
Oh wow.
So when you walk in with that, people are
Well,
like, wow.
anybody who's in the military recognizes what it is,
Yeah.
who has been in the military. But anyway, this is part of a shrapnel that exploded and hit my Jeep. Didn't hit me.
You're too good for them. You're too quick. Well, thank you, Grandpa.
Well, I hope I've done you any good at all. I don't know.
Absolutely. It's been,
But
it's
anyway,
been
I'm
great.
just one of the old men. I'm the oldest one in our ward. Now,
You
Impressive.
have always
It's the
been.
grape juice.
I get that's what it is. You're right. I'm trying to tell everybody that. Drinking the grape juice, that'll do it.
Yeah. We'll for sure do it when we get older. Or we should be doing it now.
Yeah, I love grape juice, so I would gladly drink it every day. So
Well, see, I don't put any sweetener with it when I fix it to get off a steamed juicer deal. And then I sweeten it a little bit when I open it up to drink. put a gallon of water with a gallon of juice, or a
quart of
water with
juice,
a
yeah.
quart of juice, and then I sweeten it up enough so that it's palatable. That's why the church stopped making have all these grape. We had a grape.
The grapevines, I remember we used to do work there.
The church stopped that because it took too much sugar to make it sweet enough to drink.
Oh, really?
They had to pay more for the sugar than they did to get the grape juice.
I didn't know that.
So that's why they stopped all these grape vineyards. So now if they need it or to use it, they get it from some other source.
Didn't know that.
Interesting.